Tzaddik Chesed Amud Aleph 98a. And we continue with our description of the generation of what the generation will look like when Moshiach comes. And for the most part, at least the simple reading of the Gemara, the description has been a generation that's lacking. Even though we've been attempting to find the positive spin on all these things, reality remains that the general description is that the generation is lacking in their spiritual life and even in their persecution, etc. Today, we're going to have another one like that, but then the Gemara is going to introduce, for the first time, it insinuated it earlier, but here it's going to tell us more explicitly that there are actually two manners in which Moshiach can come, in the high route or the low route. And as many of the commentaries talk, it could be a hybrid of both, or a simultaneous combination of both.
Or one before the other.
Or in stages. Or in stages. This is discussed at length, and Rabbi has a lot to say about this, but we'll go along and we'll see what we come up with. Okay, we've already alluded to this, a lot of this before, that there could be the possibility of the negative and the positive, and we're going to have it much more explicitly today.
Of the tshuva versus the...
tshuva, the two opinions, whether it's going to be waiting for us to do tshuva or God's going to provoke the tshuva. Yeah. So we've already had something like this, but this is going to become much more explicit. So let's see. First, the statements that continue to describe the generation that Moshiach comes, just in the sense that it's getting a little bit worse as time goes on.
Yeah, the Ikud Moshiach, same like more in Sota, same idea.
Yeah. Chayv Moshiach, the birth pangs of Moshiach as is known. Okay. So it's 3 lines down from the lines get widest. And the line starts doing Batli, the second Batli. And then you go down, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, there's something I want to mention from yesterday. Oh, yes. There's something I wanted to clarify from yesterday. And we talked about trusting in Hashem, that things are going to be okay, and what that means for the future. So we talked about a few different levels, and we wrapped them all together, and I want to make them distinguished. I think we can identify 3 levels. Level 1 is a person has a faith that whatever Hashem does is for the good, and therefore, even if something doesn't go the way he wants it to, he's still happy. So he does his best that the business should go well, let's say, and if it goes well, fantastic, this is what Hashem wants. It doesn't go well, also good, because it's what Hashem wants. Level 1. Level 2 is, as the Gemara indicates elsewhere, a person does teshuvah. Right, a person puts more effort into his connection with Hashem, and the rules change, and it turns out better, and it turns out good as a reward or in response to the fact that this person has changed his attitude in life. Level 2. Level 3, and this is really what I was referring to, is, and that's what they were talked about when explaining this idea of tracht gut v'zayin good. Think good and it'll be good. Here the Rebbe explained, and it's a bit of a chiddush, but the Rebbe says this, that even if a person wasn't deserving that the thing should go well, and he didn't do teshuvah in the classic sense, but by dint of the fact that he has such strong faith that Hashem is going to do good, that bitachon alone is enough for Hashem to reward him that it should be good. It's another level that Rebbe adds. It's a bit of a chiddush, and Rebbe has obviously some sources there to back it up, but that's the third higher level, which I was referring to earlier. I don't know the Gemara mentioned yesterday, you can probably place at a few of these levels, but I just wanted to make that clear, because we kind of wrapped all these things together, just to make this 3 clear distinctions. Number 1, person has faith, and therefore no matter what happens, even if it, to his eyes are negative, he has faith, this is what Hashem wants, so it's good. Level 2 is through tshuva, he can change it. And level 3 is that the very fact that he has faith in Hashem that's going to be good is in and of itself enough for Hashem to reward him to make it good. So the thinking good itself brings that it should be good. The bitachon itself is rewarded.
It's funny that you call that the highest level. I would think that's the lowest level.
Highest level in the sense of highest level from Hashem's response.
Okay.
In that sense, not in the highest. In other words, I would maybe I don't know which one would be better, right. That or teshuvah. I can't tell you, right. But highest level in terms of like,
sounds like
what you've been given access to.
Level, sort of.
Yeah, what you've been given access to, if you will, like how far you can reach with your doing. That's why it's a very strong zechai. I remember.
It's kind of almost. It's kind of like a comparison. It's not quite like the guy who flies on Yom Kippur, but making sure he has a
Yeah.
kosher meal. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of that.
Yeah, a little bit, I guess. But there are I know of occasions where the Rebbe told people when something was not going the way it should, and Rebbe told people "Trach gut wird sein gut." They told them this line: "Think good and it'll be good." And the people who would get that answer from Rebbe would literally take out that sikha and just learn it again and again and again and again, so that they taught themselves to think it will be good, not faith that whatever Hashem does is for the good. No, trust that it will be good, not just whatever Hashem wants, and therefore I'm happy either way. But trust that it will be good, and that very trust in and of itself is rewarded that it actually is good. A number of times I've told people to do that. Anyway, just wanted to clarify that. Okay, so back to the Gemara here, the description of what the generation of the Moshiach, the era of Moshiach. Amr Rabbi says, there's a pasuk, it's Batli Daini, and then there's a Diksiv, there's a verse, and then Amr Rabbi 3 lines down from the widest set of lines. Amr Rabbi you have it there? Amr Rabbi says, Imra Isa, if you observe, a generation, Shemismayet V'Hoilech, that's progressively getting literally smaller. Literal interpretation, it would seem that he means the generation is getting lower in its spiritual standing. So says Rabbi Yochanan, Chakaloi, start waiting for him. You can expect him to arrive shortly. Shenemar, as the verse reads, Va'at ani v'tashia, you are a bereft or poor nation, tashia, and your salvation arrives. As if to say, salvation arrives when their people are poor. So again, we can interpret this in the positive sense, not just that the new generation is getting worse, but the generation is making itself small. It has a bittul, has a self-surrender to what Hashem wants, which, as we talked about before, actually go hand in hand. A generation that sees itself as on a high, lofty spiritual level, often the very high, lofty spiritual level prevents them to have that sort of self-surrender to Hashem, the Kabbalah, so the submission that this is what Hashem wants and that's it. Because they feel they've reached a certain level of high spirituality. And maybe they're correct in thinking that they have that high level of spirituality.
Could that,
Sorry, yeah?
Could that have been the mindset, possibly, for the generation in the desert, having this sense of loftiness?
Yeah, there's quite a few.
Dispute with
Talk about the people who didn't want to go into the desert.
the people that were in the desert.
You want to go to Israel, you want to go back.
I'm saying people that didn't want to go to Israel.
Right.
Yeah, they felt that they were spiritually okay. What if they go to Israel for? And the mistake was, well, this is what God wants, even if you're not going to be getting manna, right? So maybe that's what it means, mismayet, as in they make themselves small, as in they surrender themselves to Hashem, and it goes hand in hand. Precisely because they're of a lower spiritual standing, what they're left with is, this is what Hashem wants, this is what I do. Right? So it's kind of hand in hand, both the negative interpretation and maybe the positive one as well. Okay, this one I don't think requires any explanation. Amar Bechan says, Imra Isa, if you see there are generations, rabbis that many persecutions, troubles and distress are mounted upon them, can nahar, like a river, just non-stop barragement, being barraged with troubles. Chakaloi, wait for him, he is coming. Shenemar, as the verse reads, Ki yavar kenar tsar, it'll come like a Nar Tsar, I think, means actually literally a narrow river, but it could also mean Nar Tsar, a river of distress. Tsar as in distress. Verduach Hashem Neisas.
This actually turn on Ki Yavway Tsar Kinahar, like the stress will come like a river. Often the Navi puts the word in order.
Then Verduach Hashem Neisasaboy, the Spirit of God is like hovering over it, as in it's along with that river of stress. There's the salvation of Hashem, the Samachle, and directly connected to that verse, it says Evolutzi and Goyal. And shall come to Zion, Goyal, the Redeemer. Okay, this line doesn't really need so much comment. The only comment that could be made is, if this is the measure, then I'm pretty sure the last 2,500 years have been one long river. So we're ready. Okay. Now here we get to the first time the Gemara makes this explicit statement of a distinction between two options in which Moshiach can come. Till now it's always been just one definitive description, which we've either interpreted as positive, negative, or some combination of both. And here the Gemara makes it very explicit. It's a very famous line, quoted in countless places, And there's lots of comments, and I'm sure there are more, but I found 2 comments in there, but one on each of these statements. I'll share them with you. And I'll share a third comment, which I didn't see explicitly from the Rebbe, but it seems to be insinuated in what he said, and then maybe we'll try to connect all these 3 things together. So Rabbi Yochanan says, Ein ben David ba, the sign of David will arrive, Ella only, but during a generation, Shekule Zakai, that's one of 2 options. Either the generation is completely perfect, or Kule Chayav, or a generation that's completely accountable, meaning completely negative. Either they're all meritorious or all liable. Those are the 2 options. Perfect generation or the completely imperfect generation. Then he brings the verses and then we'll make the comments. First, B'dorsha Kol Zakai, a verse which backs up the idea, that Moshiach will come in a generation that's perfect. The Ksiv, as the verse reads, V'amech kolom tzadikim, your people are righteous. And then La'olam, and then forever, Yeshu Aretz, they will inherit the land, referring to the world to come, the Messianic age. That's the verse which backs up the idea that everybody is perfect. V'amech kolom tzadikim, all people are perfect. And all people are perfect, that's when Moshiach comes. One verse. Then there's the other verse, which indicates the other way. But there's a generation that's all liable, all accountable. It's a negative. The Ksiv, it says, Vayar ki ein ish vayishtaimim, and he sees that there's no man because they're like is like empty, like bored or like void.
Referring to Hashem himself is like amazed.
Right, there's no people around.
Yeah, there's going on.
Ki ein mafkia, there's no one meeting him. There's no one here to talk to.
Complete to intercede.
Yeah, in modern vernacular, there's no one home, no one to talk to. The Ksiv, the verse reads later, Lamani Esa, I'll do it for my sake. In other words, there's no one in the Jews to make this happen, so I'm going to make this happen. So before we get to the comments of the Rebbe, what's clear is, in one sense, that it goes back to the discussion between Rabbi Lezer and Beshua about whether or not Mashiach comes waiting for people to do teshuvah, thus making it a generation that's all perfect, or Hashem prods the teshuvah, a generation that's all negative, and thus they need Hashem prod to do teshuvah, which I mentioned yesterday is going to connect to the question of when the world was created. You'll remember that when we say that the generation is all that Mashiach is coming, waiting for teshuvah, ma'asim time for the according to the view which says Mashiach is waiting for the Jews to do teshuvah, that falls in line with the opinion that Mashiach is that Mashiach comes in Tishrei, which is below to above. Tishrei is all about the Jew doing teshuvah from below to above, waiting for us, a generation that's all perfect from below to above, which connects to the world being created in Tishrei, and that the world is created in such a way that we're waiting for the below to above behavior, and that's why it's significant whether or not the world is created on Tishrei or Nisan, indicating what's the primary long-term process for Mashiach's arrival: below to above, Tishrei, or above to below, God's taking care of it, Nisan. And therefore, the other view, which said that the generation might be so negative to the point that Hashem is going to prod the Jews to do teshuvah. So it's above to below. It's a Nisan experience where God comes and redeems the people, and therefore Nisan, Igalu, Nisan the redeemed. Likewise, Nisan is when the world is created. It's all the same people saying the same view. Yeah.
Between Tishrei and Nisan is how many? 5 months.
6 months.
6 months. It's a quarter.
It's exactly halfway through the year.
Half a year.
Yeah. Okay. So this is I would imagine the most common way of reading this Gemara, that they fall in line with the 2 things. But it seems from the next 2 comments I'm going to share from the Rebbe that he's reading it a little bit differently. Because the Rebbe makes the following comment. The Rebbe is talking about this Kabbalistic idea that Mashiach come asila savet tzadikai b'tiyufta, which means that Mashiach is going to come and make the tzaddik do teshuvah. What does it mean, make the tzaddik do teshuvah? So there's all kinds of explanations. And one of them is that if you, in Tanya, when in the essay on Teshuvah, part 3 of Tanya called the Gezer Teshuvah, we out there lays out 2 levels of Teshuvah based on the Zohar, the higher level of Teshuvah and the lower level of Teshuvah. And there he explains the lower level of Teshuvah basically is a restoration of a person's behavior, which is connected to the lower letter Hey of the 4 letters of Hashem's name, Yud, Hey, Avav, and then the Hey. The second Hey corresponds to action. A person restores his actions, he restores that lower Hey, as explained there at length. What's the higher level of Teshuvah? To restore the higher Hey. What does it mean to restore the higher Hey? So there, says the Alter Rebbe, is to take the neshama back not just to its perfect connection to Hashem here in this world, but that the neshama here in this world should come back to feeling some of its connection to Hashem as it was prior to its coming into this world. Now that kind of teshuvah, first of all, is endless. Because just like God is infinite, and if you're talking about the divine connection between the soul and God, that itself is infinite. Meaning when you're talking about restoring behavior, okay, restored behavior, your behavior's on track, it's done, that's it. There's a cap to when that teshuvah is accomplishment. It's a finite teshuvah. Here, you've accomplished it. And the question is what motivation is there, it's a separate question. But you've accomplished the teshuvah in the almost halachic sense. But then if you're talking about teshuvah, where a person's trying to reconnect to Hashem as it was before his soul came into his body, which would mean, practically speaking, the way he thinks, the way he feels, the way he understands, the way he naturally reacts to the world around him is all in a godly fashion. That is infinite. There's infinitely deeper layers of responding to the world around you in a godly way, or putting it the other way, that your soul is reconnected to Hashem as it was before it even came to this world. Now that's the kind of teshuvah that even a tzaddik could do. That's the kind of teshuvah that even a tzaddik could do. And there, how is it connected to this Gemara? Rabbi says that this Kabbalistic idea is alluded to in Nigla. They will always like to do that. They will like to take a Kabbalistic idea and show how in Nigla, in the revealed component of Torah and Gemara or Halacha, you can see an allusion to this Kabbalistic idea. And here the Rabbi says is the allusion to that idea. Right here. Because this Gemara said, the Gemara earlier said, and this is the Halacha that Moshiach is waiting for, nothing other than Teshuvah. No conditions were given there. It doesn't say that Moshiach is waiting for Teshuvah, but if the generation is perfect, they don't need Teshuvah. It doesn't say that. It says Hashem is waiting for Teshuvah. That means, this is where the Rebbe is learning it, that even the generation that's fully perfect, as described here by Rabbi Yochanan, one of the options is Kulei Zaka, it's all perfect. So even generation that's all perfect, but also need to do Teshuvah. Thus implying, there's a love, no, for themselves too. It's a generation of Kulei Zaka. Everybody's perfect.
Sure, but
not for others, for themselves. No, not for others, for themselves.
They're perfect in behavior.
They're perfect in behavior. Right, but even a tzaddik can do teshuvah. So that's they were talking about here, that the indication that even a tzaddik can do teshuvah, especially in connection to Mashiach's coming, a Darsha, Kulei Zaka, generation is all perfect. Even they, Hashem is waiting for the teshuvah to come, in that this talk about a higher level of teshuvah.
You also explain kula, Ruba Kula doesn't mean everyone, means that's
I'm going to get that in a second, yeah?
because the soul of a human being, he can come even 70 times. Maybe correct the previous soul that he comes.
They have Gilgul.
Yeah.
The Gilgul. Huh?
Okay.
But they're different
This is
opinions.
exactly.
But some say only 3 times because that's mentioned in the Zohar Chadash.
Okay.
There are different opinions how many times you can.
So that's one comment from there about the first statement, which is Dersha Kulei Zaka, the generation that's all perfect. That makes this comment that even for them there's the teshuvah in the sense of a high level of teshuvah, in the sense of not just perfecting their behavior, which is already perfect because they're Dersha Kulei Zaka, but deepening their connection to Hashem and trying to restore their soul, teshuvah, return their neshama to a level as if they were connected to Hashem before they were even born. So it's a teshuvah that even a tzaddik does.
But the higher level of tshuva, which I presume would be for the tzaddik, is to correct the second hay, right?
Yeah.
The second hay is action, but they're
the first hay is no. It's not to correct the second hay. It's to correct the first hay. The lower teshuvah corrects the lower hay.
Yeah.
The higher teshuvah corrects the higher hay.
which is the action hay.
No, the second hay, the one after Levov, is action. That's restored in the first level of teshuvah. The first hay is actually
I
bina.
thought it was,
It's actually bina.
I heard it the reverse.
Sorry, the higher hay is actually bina. And how that works out with what I was talking about is a whole chapter in there, but it's bina. And what that means is basically chachma, right, is the original kernel idea, which means everything's pure there. It's just the idea. Bina is the analysis of the idea. So restoring the first hay, restoring bina, means that a person's analysis be true to the original idea and not veer off the path. So it's not just a behavioral issue, it's an issue of my psyche. That my inner reality, not just my behavior, my understanding of reality and my emotion, which come from my understanding of reality, should be in perfect sync with the original idea, the original yud.
That's the first.
That's the restoration of the first hay, if you want to put it in those terms.
It's also, you look at this in the grammar, that the yud, the first hay spells Hashem's name. Yud K is
a name of Hashem itself.
Vav is Vav Chibar, this roll to the, and then
that's correct. That's explained there at length. That's right.
Yeah, that's like the 4 letters of Hashem.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that's the first comment with respect to Kulei Zaka, the generation that's all perfect, and they also have this idea of doing teshuvah. Second comment I saw from the Rebbe, it doesn't seem like it's related, but maybe we could connect them, is with respect to generation of Kulei Chayav. Generation that's all, liable.
Or better way, but maybe lacking is a better way of putting it.
The literal translation of chayiv is liable, but it means you're lacking.
Because the Red Duck raised the question. It's impossible that you would always have 30 whatever generation. So it means that there are some people that are okay, but there's not enough of them. So the generation as a whole is lacking, but there always is a tzaddik.
So here comes the says like this: if they're all lacking, why is Moshiach coming then? They're not deserving. So here they connect it to the previous Gemara in this kind of way, that the very distance itself brings the teshuvah. Right? The Gemara said earlier that we're waiting for teshuvah to happen. And that's the halacha. That as soon as you do teshuvah, Moshiach comes. So the derech shekul chayv, a generation that's all liable or all lacking, in and of itself, their lack can bring to Moshiach coming. In that, the lack itself elicits the teshuvah.
That's the above to below one?
Yeah, in a way. So we have to think about that. What does that mean? So perhaps it's above to below, because
it can initially be above.
Before I get to that, I'll explain what this means. Okay. Before I get to that, I will, but I want to first finish what the Rabbi actually says, and then we can project what we think on it. So this connects to this idea that in the lower level of teshuvah, described in the Igeres Teshuvah, where the teshuvah is basically on action, restoring the lower hay, fixing one's action, the halachic level of teshuvah, the question becomes, what's the motivation for that decision? Even in the Gemara and Yuma, you have different motivations. You have primarily yira out of fear, or ava. The teshuvah is the same. The decision to no longer sin is the same. The question is, what's motivating that decision? Out of fear for repercussion, out of shame in facing Hashem, that's one yira, or ava, love of Hashem for what reason? There's all kinds of motivations leading to the same result. But over there, the Alter Rebbe in Igeres Teshuvah says that the proper way, the most perfect, wholesome motivation for this teshuvah, to restore the lower hay, to restore the behavior, the lower hay of the basic level, halachic level of teshuvah, the proper motivation is, if a person understands how through sin he disconnects himself from Hashem, and the more he appreciates the distance that he has to Hashem as a result of a sin, the more truthfully he'll decide, I never want to do that again. Actually, two things he talks about. Number one, how you're disconnecting from Hashem, and number two, how you're actually dragging Hashem into this place of negativity. The two things he describes there. Perek Zion, chapter 7 there. So all to say that the distance itself, the chayav, the fact that the generation is chayav itself, could be part of the teshuvah. And the very fact that they are distant is itself what makes them realize, one second, I have to do teshuvah here. And bringing about Moshiach's coming. Now, how do we connect that back? Now, this is what the Rebbe says. Now, how do we connect that back to what you were saying about coming from above to below? So we might suggest something like this. The Alter Rebbe talks about this idea. The Gemara says that that the wicked are full of regret. Where does that come from? By the very fact that you have a godly soul in you. Even a Jew who is a sinner also has a godly soul. And the godly soul may not be consciously expressed in this person's life because he's living a life of sin. But it's still there. So how does it manifest? It manifests that every now and again there's a thing pops into your head that says, you're far from Hashem, you should never be doing this. But then he goes back to his regular self. And then from Malay Mcharotis, he's full of regrets because he's constantly getting this idea popping into his head once a day, once a year, once a week, 5 times a day, whatever it is, that he's getting this idea in his head, I shouldn't really be behaving this way. Right? Now that thought which comes into his head that says, I shouldn't be behaving this way, which hopefully a person that you can utilize and say, you know what, I'm doing teshuvah now, I'm going to fix my behavior, and understanding that everything I've done has brought me far from Hashem, is prodded by who? By the godly soul that God puts into you. Not something you've earned. It's just, it's this thought that comes into you. So maybe even this, it still keeps in line with this idea that it comes from above to below, and that Hashem prods us to do teshuvah. And hopefully not in the way that described earlier where it comes to oppression, but hopefully it comes just because we respond to our neshama, which constantly tells us, we shouldn't be behaving this way. Yep. So those are the two comments that I've seen from the Rebbe. I'm sure there are many more. And I'm going to add a third thing, which is insinuated from something I read from the Rebbe, but I think it's an interesting take, and maybe this way we'll combine both of these. And that is like this. It's actually talking about one option, not two options. Not a derech kulei, not either kulei chayav, or not a generation that's either all liable or a generation that's all meritorious, but actually one generation. But what kind of generation is that? It's a generation where when you look at something, you could quickly identify this is all perfect or this is all no good. Meaning to say, for most of history, or even for most of reality, things are gray. You look at something, look at somebody. You say it's all perfect. No, it's good, but there's some negative motivation. There's a good action, but a bad motivation. There's a good motivation, but a bad action. There's always this gray. There's always gray matter. It's like everywhere. A person's eating kosher food, and he's doing mitzvahs using the energy that he's ate from the food, but did he really have a full intention when he was eating the food that he's doing just for the mitzvah? There's probably some part of him that wanted to enjoy it and eat it, even though he told himself, I'm really doing it for Hashem. So there's all this gray going on. And the generation of Mashiach coming is a generation where kulei zakai, kulei chayiv. You can easily identify this is all good, this is all no good. Right? Why am I saying this? Why is this so important? Because from a Kabbalistic perspective, there's what's called bidur danitzutzis. Bidur danitzutzis, which means refining the sparks or elevating the sparks. What's the idea of elevating the sparks? They often use they use a few different mashalim. They use the parable of silver that gets refined. Where as you refine it, the refining of silver basically happens by separating that which is pure silver and the alloys that are not silver. The other example they use is wine. When you sift wine to get the what's it called? Sediment out to keep the pure wine. So the purification process, this elevating the sparks, is essentially to distinguish between that which is good and no good. The sin of the tree of knowledge is what brought a meshing, where everything became gray. And the job coming towards Moshiach, from the Kabbalist perspective, is to differentiate between that and say this is good and this is not good. So maybe this is what it's alluded to in kulei zakai and kulei chayiv, and that's one generation. But it's a generation where you look at something and you say, oh, that's all good, or that's all no good, as opposed to all this gray where things are mixed up.
The Psukim though indicate.
Sorry?
The other
The Psukim indicate otherwise. That's a little bit. I haven't seen them say this explicitly, but there's something I heard something that maybe think of it. But I'll just conclude with.
Idea to do with the
yeah.
way of looking at it. Yeah. Also, you can say that the reason Hashem has to redeem us like Mitzrayim at such a low level, if Hashem doesn't go any further, there's no chance for redemption. So He has to redeem them.
But what's interesting though is even the generation that gets so low, that there's first a tshuva. In other words, Hashem has to prod the Jew to tshuva, as opposed to when they left Egypt. Hashem didn't prod them to tshuva. He just yanked them out.
No, there was some tshuva, but the Medrash mentioned
that they did two mitzvahs, a very very low level.
The mitzvah,
Mila and
but there was some tshuva as well. It's one of the 5 factors of redemption. They the quote.
Right.
Shemot. There was some tshuva. It mentions the Beinonim did some tshuva, and the Tzadikim did tshuva. The Rishayim, of course, destroyed the Machas Choshev.
So I want to conclude with one teaching that I heard once at a Fabring in Kfar Chabad from Sholem Feldman. It's old Mashbi, passed away already. So he Fabring like this. I think he was quoting the 5th Chabad Rebbe, the 4th. I think he was quoting the 4th Chabad Rebbe, the Marash. It's a very geschmack of art. It's like this: the Chetz Hadas, the sin of the sin of the tree of knowledge, brought this gray to the world, where things aren't clear, good or no good. Which means, says the 4th Chabad Rebbe, that if you see someone that's all perfect, you should know he's not 100% perfect. This doesn't exist in a time of exile until Moshiach comes, when things are clarified. Just baru v'yislabnu advarim, right? That's one of the descriptions of Moshiach's time. Is baru v'yislabnu advarim, when things become clarified. So until that clarification happens between good and no good, you see someone that looks all great, he's not perfect. And don't be shocked when you find something a little negative. Then the reverse. You find someone who, to your eyes, looks horrible. It's just the reality is no one's 100% bad. There's going to be some good.
Yeah.
That's right. And then says there, I think this is still from the Reb Marash. This is still a quote from the 4th Chabad Rebbe, that it's possible that a little bit of good that the bad guy has is exactly the lack that the good guy is missing. That the good guy has a little bit of negative. That little bit of negative is actually the good part that the other guy has. And I think this is the end of the line for the quote from the Reb Marash from the 4th Chabad Rebbe. Now, Sholem Feldman commented, this Mashbiach commented, that's possible. That the reason why the tzaddik, the good guy who has a little bit of bad, feels animosity towards the guy who's not so good, is not because he's not good and has contempt for bad behavior. It's precisely because that not good guy has that one quality that he needs. And that's why it bothers him so much. All to say that unless you feel like you're kulei zakai kulei chayiv, where you have clarity of everything, this is perfect and that's no good, don't be so quick to judge everybody else around you. Have a wonderful day.